This is a bottle of deodorant, something most Chinese people might go their whole lives without using, but abroad it is a lifesaver for many. According to a 2024 survey, 69% of people in the United States use deodorant at least once a day, 15 use it multiple times a day, and only 4 don't use it at all. In the UK, 86 of women and 73 of men use deodorant every day. In fact, on this blue planet, almost everyone has body odor, except in East Asia. Only a tiny minority, about 1 to 5, have noticeable body odor. Those who do might even face social exclusion, but in truth, those of us without it are the real outliers. So why is body odor so common around the world? How did we Chinese escape the fate of lifelong body odor? And how can you tell if you actually have it? Hi, everyone. This is Kanchai. Today, let's put body odor in the spotlight. This is the human armpit inside this nest. There are 2 types of sweat glands, eccrine and apocrine. Eccrine glands are spread across the body and produce thin sweat, while apocrine glands are concentrated in the armpits, groin, and ear canals. Sweat they secrete is much thicker. Although sweat itself is odorless, it's rich in fatty acids and proteins, basically a state banquet for bacteria, a feast if you will. When these proteins are broken down, the metabolic byproducts are highly volatile and have a very pungent smell. So, in theory, do you think it's because you just sweat less? If there isn't enough protein for bacteria to eat, you won't have body odor. Actually, what really determines your body odor is the APS11 gene. This gene is fascinating. It isn't the direct culprit itself. Every one of us has it in our bodies, but whether it can unleash an all-powerful odor depends on the 2 alleles on it. Think of the apocrine gland as an odor factory. Inside, there are 2 decision makers. Allele are advocates for less sweat and no food for bacteria, while allele does the exact opposite. The amount it wants to discharge is significantly higher. So whether a person has body odor depends on who is in charge of the factory in their body. Statistics show 95% of people in northern China and the central plains are allele A, or at least have an A combination. In Nagasaki, Japan, the figure is 82-9. As for South Korea, it's even more extreme in the Daegu sample. The proportion of people carrying the AA type once reached 100. Such genetic purity is extremely rare globally. Forget extreme cases like Daegu. Looking at East Asia as a whole, it's simply not a very scented region. Interestingly, because Native American ancestors came from East Asia, they also inherited our odorless gene. Thus, the Americas have one of the lowest frequencies of body odor genes outside East Asia. So what is the reason for all of this? Let's go back tens of thousands of years. Human ancestors hadn't yet developed systematic language to communicate. The most direct way was through scent, by sniffing each other. Could tell who someone was, their mood, and even their relationship status. In animals, these are pheromones for humans at that time. They served as information trackers. The turning point occurred in the late Upper Paleolithic. The apocrine gland's extraordinary sweating capacity, while life-saving for early humans in the African heat, met a changing era. As some early humans migrated to East Asia, their tendency to sweat caused them to suffer from recurring hypothermia in the cold. Meanwhile, as human verbal and body language evolved, pheromones became increasingly obsolete. So for survival, allele gradually became dominant among these early ancestors. After 40 years of natural selection, this region finally became an odorless zone. However, no matter how large the sweat glands are, they need surplus protein to give bacteria something to decompose. Well, speaking of which, this is where Westerners enter the conversation. With a diet rich in dairy butter, high fat and high protein, they never miss a beat across 3 meals a day. This results in a completely different gut microbiota compared to other dietary groups. The Western diet fosters good bacteria that lean toward putrefaction, meaning they have more protein-decomposing bacteria. The odor of their metabolic byproducts is much stronger than that of fiber-rich fermenting bacteria. With all these buffs stacked together, the stereotype of foreigners having a strong scent was formed. To tackle this, the West didn't have many effective solutions back then, mostly just perfumes or deodorants that were either inconvenient or skin-irritating. It wasn't until the 1910s that an American student, Edna Murphy, launched a breakthrough product. Her father, a doctor, used a homemade antiperspirant to keep his hands dry. To ensure it didn't interfere with his surgeries, the business-savvy Murphy was instantly inspired by this, and in 1912 she founded the world-renowned deodorant brand Odorono. However, back then, the Western public's perception of body odor was much like that of their Victorian ancestors. They generally believed that blocking sweat was harmful to the body and unnecessary. As a result, Odorono's initial sales were dismal. To break the market deadlock, Odorono came up with a dirty trick by convincing people that body odor is a deeply embarrassing issue. They manufactured a new demand. So, in 1990, in a ladies' home journal, Odorono made a bold move and published a scandalous advertisement within the curve of a woman's arm, a frank discussion of a subject too often avoided, accompanied by an illustration of a romantic moment between a man and a woman. The ad then bluntly suggested that women might have an offensive odor, and they wouldn't even know it themselves. With that, said the message was clear. If you want to keep your man, you'd better not smell. Unpublished readers were absolutely furious. At least 200 angry subscribers wrote in to cancel their subscriptions, feeling personally insulted. But while the backlash was fierce, piles of cash were flooding into Odorono's bank accounts like a tide. Between 1919 and 1920, Odorono's sales skyrocketed by 112, with revenue reaching a staggering $417. The following year, remember this was the early 20th century with that kind of purchasing power. Odorono was laughing all the way to the bank. However, one man's gain was another's anxiety. Odorono hit the jackpot, but body odor, once a tacitly ignored non-issue, was now elevated to the status of essential social etiquette. Since then, the West has entered its own era of body odor anxiety. Today, whether in the West or in China, there is a universal consensus that smelling bad is a social taboo. But unlike Westerners who fear that others might think they forgot to deodorize, the Chinese fear something else, that others might realize they need to. For the small minority of East Asians with body odor buying and using antiperspirant is often done quite discreetly. Among students, most prefer to slip into a restroom stall to apply their antiperspirant, and they go to great lengths to hide their condition in public. But for Westerners, it's a completely different story. A British study found that among the group with the odorless gene, specifically over 3/4 of these women still use deodorant every day purely out of habit and social conformity rather than any actual need. So, how can you tell if you have body odor? As we mentioned earlier, apocrine sweat glands are found not just in the armpits but also in the ear canals. This leads to an interesting observation. If you carry the dominant G allele of the ABS11 gene, your earwax will be sticky brown and oily, and you likely have body odor. But if you carry the allele, your earwax will be dry and flaky, which usually means no body odor. That's why Westerners typically use cotton swabs to clean their ears. Since their earwax is wet and oily, it has to be swabbed out. However, while wet earwax and body odor are strongly linked, it's not a guarantee, just a much higher probability. If you want to be sure whether you have body odor, you can also check for yellow stains in the armpit area of your clothes. Lipids from apocrine secretions tend to stick to fabric and turn yellow when oxidized. If you have body odor and wear light-colored clothing, there's a high probability of leaving yellow marks behind. Also, the inheritance pattern of body odor is quite fascinating. As long as your parents carry the odor gene, there is a 50 chance that you will inherit it. If both of your parents have body odor, then your chances of inheriting body odor are as high as 75. So if one of your parents has wet earwax and body odor, the likelihood of you having it is very high. There is a theory that in ancient East Asian societies, individuals without the body odor gene were more favored as partners. Over time, those with the body odor gene were less likely to pass on their genes. This also explains why, in just tens of thousands of years, East Asians reduced the proportion of people with body odor to less than 10. It seems our ancestors truly preferred partners without body odor. While body odor can be unpleasant, it certainly doesn't warrant being treated as someone to be shunned as long as basic hygiene is maintained. Even the minority of East Asians who have body odor should have an environment where they can use deodorant freely and comfortably. The world is inherently diverse, and people with body odor are actually the global majority. Our ancestors didn't lose their apocrine glands because they disliked the smell. It was simply because it was too cold. Therefore, in this modern civilization, which is far more advanced than that of our ancestors, showing more tolerance and understanding is the most sensational and heartwarming way to embrace our differences.